Welcome back. Let's talk a little more about modernism. In this video, I want to talk more about William Faulkner, and I also want to talk about a couple of poems that I've set up for this week. One's by T.S. Eliot, and the other one is by William Butler Yeats, both completely canonical poems in this movement. Let me just talk a little bit about assignments for this week, and then I'll get into talking about the actual literature you'll be reading. So here we are in week 9. You're going to finish As I Lay Dying this week, so 137 to 261 in your hard copy. And then I also have some texts and videos of poems here. I'll talk about those in a minute, though, because for your assignments, I don't want you to deal with these poems at all. I'm going to talk about these poems during this lecture, but you're not going to have anything assigned connected to these poems. So, I mean, I guess at the end of the lecture, the second half of this, you'll be able to make the decision about whether you care about these or not. I'm really excited about these poems. I'm going to talk a little bit about them, and I also have some videos attached with people reading these poems. But your assignment is only going to be based on William Faulkner's novel, the second half of it. So we're going to have another note-taking demo. So this will be the one where you want to write right in the book and take pictures of it, and make sure you revisit the instructions, because I'm going to want you to take 3 different pictures in 3 different sections, right? You'll do your journal on Faulkner. Now, when you do this journal, I really want you to be investigating some ideas and or confusions that you get from the text itself. Don't go to SparkNotes or AI and find themes. I really don't want to hear about themes or how something is profound. What I really want in this journal is for you to give some really honest feedback about how you're experiencing the story. Use lots of quotes, at least 3 are required, and use APA citations for those. I don't really care if you're confused, as long as you're giving me some information about how you're trying to work with this material and make sense of it. That's what I'm looking for. That'll be an A paper. That's what I'm excited to read. So be really careful with your journal, and be as genuine as you can with it, okay? Then the discussion is going to be based on modernism in general, but I really want you to be referring to text with this. Don't make it sound like some sort of general review that you read on Wikipedia or something about like what this movement's like. I'd like you to be talking about the text. You can be talking about how they fit into the movement, but I want you to say some specific things. So for the discussion, you can include Eliot and Yeats if you want to. If you want to just keep the discussion focused on more of your thoughts on Faulkner and the overall thoughts you have with how it has gone in this unit, that's great too. So just make sure that whatever you do, don't abandon the text. Make sure that you're sticking with talking about these actual works. And then, of course, you'll have to respond to that discussion by the following Wednesday. So let's just talk. I want to talk about all 3 of these authors, even though your assignment is only based on William Faulkner. There's a certain kind of, I guess, lens or attitude that you can be reading these authors with. And that is, there are different things you can do, but what I suggest is think about clarity versus ambiguity or ambivalence, right? Which is which, and how do you sort it all out? Because there is very, very precise, crisp, clear language being used in all of these pieces, but yet the meaning itself kind of escapes you. So sometimes it's hard to know exactly what it means. So when I was talking about decentering last time, you can be thinking in that sort of direction, right? Even though there's very clear language being used, the center of meaning is kind of slippery. That's how these are supposed to be. It is not a flaw in the writing. And if you're having the impression that there's something missing as far as the meaning goes, that's what adds to the greatness of these writings. It's not a flaw, and it doesn't make them not thought out or lame or stupid. It makes them, it's one of the features that's intentional. So with Faulkner, here's some things that you can be thinking about as far as meaning goes, and maybe give you some sort of anchor to hold on to, you can find lots and lots of things to think about. But here's some things that you might possibly think about. Like, what does it mean for a loser like Ants? Because Ants really is a loser, isn't he? What does it mean for him to be like relentlessly fulfilling his wife's final wish? Here's a guy who has been a leech his whole life, is really lazy, and he's kind of going through a bunch of pain to make this journey, and also during this journey, he keeps saying that he won't be beholden to anyone, right? That's the word he uses over and over. Whenever someone wants to help, he says, "No, we wouldn't be beholden." He's been beholden his whole life, right? So what does that mean? What kind of ideas can you generate from that? Here's another thing to think about. Like, what does it mean for one of the sons to be making this journey in agony with a broken leg, and for the family to be too cheap to have his leg set properly, and for him to be fine with it too and say, we gotta go, even though he's in absolute agony. Um, what does this say, positive, negative, or otherwise, about this family, about their values, about what kind of message we're supposed to be getting? Um, think about the character Darl. Is he the golden boy that the narration kind of makes him out to be, since he's a little bit, seems maybe a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more thoughtful, but yet he doesn't really get respected for that, does he? So, what do you mean? What kind of meaning can you make from all of that? What do you make of Vardaman's thoughts? So the little boy Vardaman, um, he goes into these sort of fantastical and very confused rants in his mind. He starts to get very confused about his mother and about the fish. It's one of my favorite parts of the book. Um, Very abstract and strange. And in a child's mind, what can you make of that, with the child's perspective in all of this, in the whirlwind of things that are happening to him? Um, Another thing to think about, is there some sort of discernible code of honor that this family is adhering to and suffering for? Um, all this stuff they're going through, can you find a rhyme and reason for it? Is there some nobility in what they're doing? Or are they just torturing themselves kind of needlessly? Is it all kind of senseless? That's for you to decide, and you will find textual evidence to support that. So these are just some possibilities of things to be thinking about as you finish up this book. And make sure, whether you go with one of these lines of reasoning or something else, just make sure that you're finding textual evidence to support what you're saying. Keep this connected to the book. Use lots of language from the book and cite it properly with page numbers, so that it can be so that anybody can go back and kind of look at what you're doing and see if they agree or disagree, or are furtherly provoked by the things that you're saying and the evidence that you're using. That's part of what is important in this field. So yeah, that's just some more thoughts on Faulkner. I hope you're appreciating this book, even though it's hard. Um, I hope you're getting some of the feelings that I've gotten from this book. Um, Now I want to talk about a couple of poems. So you don't have any um, assignments connected to these, but these are two of my favorite poems, and they're really, really influential in modernism and in just literature in general. So one of the poems is T.S. Eliot, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. This is a really strange poem, very cool. It's on the long side, but it's got such a mix of things, and it's so clear and baffling at the same time that I just love it. This is one of the poems back when I was an undergraduate. I was really living the literary life. I mean, I was writing a lot. I was totally reading so much literature, and I just became sort of my identity, even more than it is now, because now I'm just a professor bogged down and doing a whole bunch of committee work and assessments and things like that. And I feel like I'm less literary now than I was when I was an undergrad. But I used to just get passionate about this stuff. I would memorize these long poems to try to impress people, and this poem is one of them that I did that with. So here's some thoughts about the poem, so you can read it and think about it. And then I also have a video of somebody else reading this poem that I just attached to this module. There are a lot of different YouTube videos of people reading this song. There's even one of T.S. Eliot himself reading this poem. And to tell you the truth, I hated the way he read it. So I didn't include that one. I included somebody else reading the poem because I liked their rendition of it better than T.S. Eliot himself. But okay, so the thing about this poem, Proof Rock, is so it was written in like more or less free verse. And that's the story with a lot of modernist poetry. They want to get away from the structures. But the thing about this is it has a lot of, it falls into formal verse, at least a little bit here and there, sort of purposely. He's referencing a lot of classical forms and showing that he understands deeply these classical forms, is very familiar with them, is choosing to only use them intermittently. And there's something really genius about that. He's sort of flexing his muscles of knowledge, even though he's completely moving away from these structures. So you're going to see rhyme schemes that seem really familiar and classical to you. There's going to be certain couplets that rhyme in a very intentional way and recall more classical poetry. There are lots of refrains in this poem, especially the refrain, in the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. I love that refrain, and it really speaks to the topic of the time. So it's sort of a classical refrain, but it's also talking about this very modern angst about looking at great works of art, but not really knowing what you're talking about, that kind of thing. There are also a lot of classical references in content and symbolism that would normally be very specifically meaningful, but kind of gets its meaning swept away in this poem. So, like, just for example, he talks about sirens, right? How sirens, they would not, the siren song would not connect with him the same way it would with someone in the classical past. So even this very clear symbol of the siren sort of gets a little bit muddled in this poem, and it's fascinating. So the poem starts off with him walking through the streets. He's in an urban, modern at the time setting, and he's talking to someone. He uses the you and I, right? And so you're kind of, I feel like the reader of the poem is kind of standing in for that person he's talking to. It seems like kind of a romantic experience possibly that they're having, but you're supposed to kind of feel like you're being spoken to a little bit. But then the poem really falls into this kind of abstract introspection, and it starts to become hard to figure out if he's still speaking or if he's thinking. And this is that sort of modernist introspection that we think about a lot. So it's hard to pin down any specific meaning. He's also being really introspective. So it's like he wants to express something very personal. He wants his true and unique nature to be something that he can talk about. But he's kind of stuck in his head and stuck in this abstraction. And there's something to be said here about modern life, you know, the way we're all highly, highly individual people, but this grid that we live in keeps us from expressing it. This is my take on it. This isn't everybody's take on it, so I want you to have your own. But I just want to give you a little bit of framework. So if you read through with this sort of modernist lens while you're reading this, so this speaker is somebody who is really well read, very smart, has a lot of classical knowledge, but is really unable to express it in this particular environment. I think there's a lot you can probably get out of this poem, the angst of it all, the uncertainty of it, the frustration, the wondering about a place in the world, all this kind of stuff. So, you know, I think it'd be great if you know, listen to either the YouTube video that I have posted, or any other one if you want. There's one where Anthony Hopkins reads it. I don't really like his reading either. Both T.S. Eliot and Anthony Hopkins, I'm not in love with the way they read this poem. The one that I have there is better. I personally would read it different, but honestly, my poetry reading voice and moxie isn't really up to par right now, so I don't want to embarrass myself trying to do a good reading of this poem. So I'll give you some other resources for that instead. I'll also say just a few brief words about the other poem I'd like you to take a look at. And this is The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats, another one of my favorite poems, another one that I had memorized back in the day. This one's easier to memorize because it's much shorter. It's just 2 stanzas. So this poem, it's obvious what the overtones are, and it's obvious what the feeling is you're supposed to get. What's not obvious is what the center of meaning is, right? So it has overtones of war and religion and chaos and sort of an end to things, a very ominous end to things. That's all very, very clear. The words and the images are just crisp and clear. The images, especially, it's almost like you're seeing them on a screen. So these all have this effect of leading you towards something that you think is pretty clear, that should be pretty obvious, but you could just never quite get there. It never quite takes you to the end where you can really understand it all, right? This idea, it's kind of like this is the way things have always been, but yet we can never quite get there. This poem has, the most famous line of this poem is, "The center cannot hold." And I'm sure you've heard that 1,000 times, even if you haven't read this poem. And that is one reason why this is sort of, I think I mentioned in my lecture, I consider this, and a lot of people I think consider this to be the quintessential poem from the modernist movement. This idea that the center cannot hold. So there's all kinds of ways that we're trying to make meaning. We're having a lot of very rigorous insight into things. We're learning so much through science and different social movements and everything, but we can't quite figure out what it ultimately means. We're just people screwing around, learning all kinds of stuff, but why, right? So this poem has this sort of feeling that like we're trying and trying, but we can't quite keep up. We're getting exhausted and losing energy. And this idea that the best, like the best of us lack all conviction. So like we're losing our conviction, we're losing our focus, we're losing our goodness, and we can't quite accomplish what we need to do ethically, morally in this world. But as we start to see, that's very, very ominous because the world is out there. And there are things out in this world that are real. And something, if humankind, if we can't get our shit together, there's something dark out there that will make the decisions for us. We can think of this in terms of religion, war, all kinds of different social and sort of ecological problems that we can be facing. But the point is, and you can interpret this in different ways, right? But the point is, either we will figure out what this all means and decide our own fate, or fate will be decided for us, and it's horrifying. All right, so all of this stuff is on the module. I invite you to just, play with this stuff and enjoy it as much as you can, and write something that's really sincere in your journal, and just know that that's the kind of thing that I love reading. I hope that you can have some of the feelings from this literature that I did when I was an undergrad. I continue to have these feelings from this, but there was something just so special about it back when I was studying it for the first time. So I've gone long enough in this video, I guess, so I'm just going to hang it up and stop being excited about modernism. So have a good week, and I'll talk to you soon.